Life has a strange way of weaving its own mysteries. Some encounters seem like pure chance, while others carry the weight of something far greater, almost as if they were meant to happen. Michael never believed in fate. For him, life was a series of choices, a road we walk without maps, without guarantees. But that afternoon, as he walked slowly among the damp gravestones at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, holding a half-wilted bouquet in his hand, something changed. He didn't notice it at first. He was lost in thought, like he had been every Sunday since Sarah passed away. But when his eyes fell on the grave next to hers, something caught his attention. A thick, weathered notebook resting carefully on the stone. The wind hadn't moved it. The rain hadn't ruined it. It was just there, untouched, as if it were waiting for someone. Michael hesitated. He picked it up with unsure fingers, feeling the rough texture of the pages. It was a journal, not his, but written by someone who clearly knew the same pain, someone who kept coming back here, week after week, looking for something that could never be returned. Without even realizing it, he opened to the first page. Michael walked the gravel path of Greenwood Cemetery, deep in the heart of Brooklyn, New York. In his hand, he held a single white lily, Sarah's favorite flower. The spring breeze rustled the trees above, and the birdsong clashed cruelly with the weight in his chest. This was his sacred ritual, the weekly visit to the grave of his wife, who had passed away exactly 1 year ago. The loss still tore him apart. Sarah had been diagnosed with a rare illness, and before they could even begin treatment, she was gone. Not even a year of marriage, not enough time to live the dreams they had built together. They had known each other since childhood, next-door neighbors, best friends, inseparable companions. Summers spent at the local park, winters wrapped in stories whispered around the fireplace. Their love had grown naturally, almost inevitably, like something written long before either of them understood what love was. But fate split them apart when college took them to different states. Still, they never lost touch. Messages, letters, late-night calls. That was enough to keep the flame alive, until years later they met again at a friend's party. And the connection? It was even stronger than before. After a few months of an intense romance, Michael and Sarah got married in a small ceremony, surrounded only by those who truly mattered. They dreamed of a future filled with travel, children, and a life that felt like it would go on forever. But the future is never guaranteed. Just months after their wedding, Sarah began to feel unwell. Fatigue, dizziness, unexplained fevers. Doctors struggled to diagnose her, and when they finally did, it was already too late. Michael could do nothing but watch as the love of his life faded before his eyes. Her final breath still echoed in his mind, a sound he relived every night as he closed his eyes. Now, kneeling in front of the headstone, Michael gently ran his fingers across Sarah's name carved into the cold marble. "Hi, my love." His voice barely came out. "I brought your favorite flower." The silence in the cemetery felt heavier than usual. He took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. Like he did every week, he began talking to her about his week, the small struggles, the tiny victories. But that night, the pain felt heavier than ever. That's when something caught his eye. On the grave next to Sarah's, a single red carnation had been placed with care. Michael frowned. The stone belonged to a man named Matthew, and beneath his name the inscription read, "Beloved husband of Samantha." Without really knowing why, Michael picked up the red carnation and, using a forgotten rubber band lying on the ground, gently tied it together with the white lily he had brought. A silent symbol, a tribute to shared memories between strangers. He stood up and slowly traced 2 letters in the dirt with his finger. MS. Something he and Sarah used to write to each other on the corners of their college letters. The ache in his chest grew stronger. He closed his eyes, breathed in deeply. "I'm sorry, love. It just hurts too much today. I have to go, but I'll be back. I always come back." With his eyes full of tears, Michael turned and walked away. And just as he exited the cemetery, lost in his grief, he almost bumped into a woman. "Sorry," he mumbled, too embarrassed to look up. He didn't want anyone to see his tear-streaked face. Then something hit him, soft but deep. Her perfume. It was delicate but unmistakable, familiar. Michael paused, heart pounding. But then he shook his head and kept walking. He couldn't afford to look back. Not tonight. A few minutes later, Samantha arrived at Matthew's grave. As she approached, her eyes fixed on something strange. The red carnation she had carefully left on his stone was now wrapped with a white lily and placed on the grave next to his. A knot tightened in her throat. Someone had touched the offering she left for Matthew. Anger and sorrow surged through her at the same time. With a quick, instinctive motion, she crouched down, separated the flowers, and returned the carnation to its rightful place. But then, something even more unsettling caught her eye. In the dirt, just in front of Matthew's stone, someone had drawn the letters MS. Samantha froze. Her breath caught in her chest. It didn't make sense. She and Matthew had a tradition. They used to leave each other small messages, using only their initials, M and S, a quiet language of love they'd carried since the early years of their relationship. But they had never written the initials together like that. She had never thought to. Now seeing those two letters side by side, drawn into the earth, it broke something open inside her. It was beautiful and heartbreaking. But who would have done that? And more importantly, why? Her grief and confusion collided, making it hard to tell what was real and what her heart wanted to believe. Was she losing her mind? Lately, her thoughts bounced between happy memories and unbearable despair. But this was real. She picked up the flowers again, pulled off the rubber band and separated them. With a trembling sigh, she placed the carnation back on Matthew's grave and held the lily for a moment before returning it to the grave next door. "Here," she whispered. "You keep your flower. I'll keep mine." Then she collapsed into tears. Samantha sat down beside Matthew's grave and buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of longing. A few blocks away, Michael found a small cafe tucked between two buildings. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries meant nothing to him at that moment. All he wanted was a little silence, or maybe a shot of whiskey, not coffee. He walked in, ordered a double espresso and sat by the window, watching cars crawl past in slow motion. His mind wasn't in the room. It never really was anymore. Losing Sarah never got easier. The coffee arrived, but Michael barely touched the cup. He just sat there, eyes blank, drowning in memories. Back at the cemetery, Samantha opened her bag with trembling hands. She pulled out a thick journal and a black pen. Her eyes were raw from crying, but she had to let it out somewhere. On the first page, she wrote, "Matt, I bought this notebook so I can write to you every time I come here. I know it sounds crazy, but I need a place to put everything I'm feeling. I would give anything to say this to you in person, but I can't. So I'm writing instead." Her heart pounded. "The guilt is eating me alive, my love. If I had just stayed in bed with you that day, you wanted to make love, but I insisted on going out. You wanted to enjoy a sunny Sunday together. And as always, you gave in to what I wanted, but if, just once, I had listened to you instead." Tears poured uncontrollably from her eyes. "You'd still be alive." Her breathing grew heavier, like the weight of the words was physically crushing her. "But how could I have known, Matt? How could I have known that damn driver would lose control and hit you?" The pain pierced her chest like a blade. The memory of that day was burned into her mind like a nightmare she would never wake from. The screeching tires, the scream, and then the silence. Samantha clenched her eyes shut, pressing her hands against the notebook. The guilt was devouring her from the inside out. She lay down on the ground next to Matthew's grave, feeling utterly empty, wishing the earth would just open up and swallow her whole. Days later, Michael returned to Sarah's grave. The ritual was always the same. He arrived, replaced the wilted flower with a fresh white lily, and sat quietly beside her headstone. Time would pass, and he would remain there, trying in some desperate way to feel her presence again. But that afternoon, something unusual caught his attention. A notebook. It was resting beside Matthew's grave, right where Michael had traced the initials MS just days before. At first he thought nothing of it, probably belonged to another regular visitor, but as minutes passed, the notebook began to weigh on him. It was as if it was calling out, waiting to be read. Michael kept turning his eyes away, but they always returned to that same spot. Something inside him whispered, "That notebook is here for a reason." Eventually, unable to resist the silent pull, he stood up. He walked over to Matthew's grave and picked up the notebook with reverent hands, as if he were holding something sacred, something precious, something mysteriously tied to him. Back beside Sarah's grave, Michael slowly opened the notebook to the first page. The words hit him like a punch straight to the chest, the weight of guilt, the torment of what if. He knew that feeling all too well. Different story. Same pain. The unbearable burden of loving someone taken too soon by life's cruelty. He read the entry slowly, feeling the voice of a complete stranger echo inside him. There was something raw in those words. Honest, unfiltered grief that pierced through him like it was his own. He closed the notebook gently, honoring the privacy of the confession, but no matter how hard he tried to brush it off, something inside him insisted. This was no coincidence. Fate was stitching their lives together in ways he didn't yet understand. Michael returned the notebook to Matthew's grave and stood quietly. There was more to this story. As he turned to leave, he gave one final glance toward the headstone. The last line from the entry echoed in his mind. What if is a heavy burden to carry alone. Maybe, just maybe, whoever had written those words needed someone to share the weight. With that thought, Michael left the cemetery. But something in him had shifted. He needed to find her. Weeks passed. Michael kept visiting the cemetery as always, still leaving a lily for Sarah, still searching the grave next to hers for signs that she had come back. But nothing changed. The notebook remained untouched. No new entries, no clues. It was as if Samantha had vanished. Her absence began to bother him in ways he hadn't expected. The lack of new words in the notebook left behind a growing sense of unease, like a vital piece of the story was missing. Something unfinished, something waiting. That afternoon, after yet another silent visit to the cemetery, Michael found himself sitting on a park bench nearby, the same park where he and Sarah used to walk together on quiet Sunday mornings. The empty space beside him had never felt so wide. He thought about the past weeks, trying to understand why he couldn't move on. It had been a full year, and yet he was still stuck in the same grief, unable to focus on work, unable to escape the suffocating melancholy that shadowed every part of his life. Alcohol, once an occasional crutch, had started to feel more like a constant companion. The following week, Michael decided to do something different. If Samantha wasn't coming back to write, maybe he could write to Sarah. That afternoon, when he arrived at the cemetery, a chill ran down his spine. The notebook was still there, forgotten, or maybe waiting for him. He sat beside Sarah's headstone, running his fingers across the notebook's worn cover, deep in thought. He reread Samantha's message. It hit him in the chest again. Knowing she had written that, had left that piece of herself right here in the same place where he mourned, made him feel less alone. But he also knew he had to be careful. Her wounds were just as deep as his, maybe deeper. He took a deep breath. Then slowly he picked up the pen and began to write. Just 2 letters at first. I remember the day you drew those letters on our fogged-up window. It was a cold winter morning. I was still half asleep, waking up beside you. When I saw M+S written in your messy handwriting, my heart filled with a kind of joy I still don't know how to describe. It was simple, but it meant everything. You and me, always. At least, that's what I believed. I miss you every single day. Nothing makes sense without you. But today I want to believe that somehow you're still here. I love you, I always will. M. His eyes welled with tears as he closed the notebook gently. He placed it back beside Matthew's grave. As he left the cemetery that day, something inside him felt different. It wasn't peace. Not exactly. But for the first time in a long time, the pain felt a little more bearable. A few days later, Samantha returned to the cemetery. She was hesitant, unsure if she was ready to face it again. But as soon as she approached Matthew's grave, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The notebook had been moved. Her heartbeat quickened. With trembling hands, she picked it up, sensing an invisible weight tucked between the pages. She turned through it slowly, until she found a message that wasn't hers. As she read the words, a wave of emotion erupted inside her. First, grief, the memory of Matthew, the way he used to use their initials to say things without saying anything, the quiet love that lived in tiny gestures. Then, anger. How dare someone touch this? How dare someone use the same initials, something so deeply intimate and sacred between her and Matthew, to write to someone else? Samantha slammed the notebook shut. Tears burned in her eyes. She didn't know who had done it, but she knew one thing. She couldn't ignore it. For the first time since Matthew's death, she felt something beyond pain. She felt the urge to find whoever had written those words. It was like something deeply personal had been violated. a space that belonged only to her and Matthew. The notebook, that page. It all felt like an insult. Her rage flared before she could stop it. Without thinking, she grabbed the page and tore it, almost in half. The tears came again. Guilt, grief, frustration. She didn't want to feel any of it, but she couldn't stop. For a moment, the entire world felt like it was collapsing. The notebook, this simple, harmless object, had suddenly become a symbol of everything she had lost. Samantha stepped back, sobs echoing through the silence of the cemetery. She couldn't stay there another second. Her chest heaved, her hands trembled, her sanity felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Without looking back, she let the notebook fall beside Matthew's headstone and walked away, almost running. The sky above began to darken, a mirror of the storm building inside her. Samantha knew one thing for sure: she had to find a way to deal with this pain before it swallowed her whole. That same afternoon, Michael returned to the cemetery. What he found made his heart stop for a moment. The notebook was lying on the ground. The page he had written was torn, his words shredded. Michael slowly knelt down and picked up the notebook with care, feeling a new kind of weight, a heavy, uncomfortable one. Then a sharp realization hit him, cold and cutting. He had stepped into a space that didn't belong to him. What he had done wasn't poetic. It wasn't touching, it was a violation. He had intruded on someone else's grief, someone else's pain, someone else's love. In trying to soothe his own loneliness, he had crossed a line he should never have crossed. And now, the torn pages before him revealed the impact of that mistake. Respect. That word echoed in his mind as he gently placed the notebook back where it had been, like he was trying to undo what couldn't be undone. As he walked away from the cemetery, Michael realized something. Loneliness is not an excuse to invade another person's sorrow. And that was a lesson he would never forget. But something inside him couldn't let it go. The thought that he had hurt someone just like him, trying to survive unbearable loss, troubled him more than he wanted to admit. Michael knew he had to make it right. The next morning, he woke up early. There were deadlines to meet and work projects to handle, but he couldn't focus. The only place that gave him a shred of peace was the cemetery. When he arrived, his feet instinctively carried him toward Sarah's grave, but his eyes were on the notebook. He knew what he had to do, not for himself, but for the woman whose pain he had unintentionally made worse. With hesitant hands, he picked up the notebook, took a breath, and began to write. "Ma'am, please accept my sincere apologies. I took the liberty of reading your message to your late husband, and I was deeply moved. After much reflection, I felt an overwhelming need to communicate with my wife, Sarah, and I left a message for her in this notebook, hoping, irrationally, that somehow she might receive it. I know it may sound insane, maybe I am losing my mind, but in that moment it was the only thing that made sense. Now, however, I realize I crossed a line. This notebook is yours. This grief is yours. My only intention with this message is to say, I'm sorry. I promise it won't happen again. I'm truly sorry for your loss and for any additional pain I may have caused. With deepest respect, Michael closed the notebook slowly, sealing his regret with every movement. He placed it gently beside Matthew's grave and stepped away. This time he didn't expect anything in return. As he walked out of the cemetery, something inside him shifted. It wasn't peace, but maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of one. Wanting to change his focus, if only for a while, Michael decided to stop by the same cafe he had visited a few days earlier. This time, as he approached, he noticed something he hadn't before. The line stretched out the door and down the sidewalk. The place was buzzing. Then he looked up and smiled. The cafe's name, 7 Feet Under. Michael let out a short laugh. The name was unusual, but fitting. Considering it was right next to the city's largest cemetery, he found it oddly comforting that a place with such a morbid theme could attract so many people, but it made sense. What he didn't know was that 7 Feet Under had become a social media phenomenon. With its dark humor, quirky menu, and hauntingly stylish atmosphere, influencers and curious visitors came from all over just to experience it. What started as a joke had turned into one of the most popular cafes in the city. Even with the long line, Michael decided to wait. There was something reassuring about being in a space where people could embrace mortality with warmth, wit, and good coffee. Maybe, for the first time in a while, he could do the same. Thirsty as he waited in line, a voice ahead caught his attention. "Hi, I'll have one espresso from the Beyond, a 7 feet croissant, and a Ghostbusters donut, please." Michael raised an eyebrow, intrigued. The woman's tone was casual, but the names on the menu were anything but. Curious, he glanced up at the board for the first time. The entire menu was themed, a love letter to the supernatural, horror films, and the concept of death itself. Macabre latte, mocha from the other side, funeral bagel, poltergeist muffin. And it didn't stop there. There was also the It Frappuccino, the Walking Dead toast, and the Omen milkshake. Michael let out a soft chuckle. Now it made sense why the place had become so popular. It wasn't just a cafe. It was an experience. A mix of dark humor and genuine comfort, strangely warm, oddly familiar. As he studied the menu, he turned to check the line behind him. That's when his eyes locked onto a woman standing a few meters back. For a split second, his heart skipped a beat. Recognition. That strange, fleeting feeling that he knew her, somehow. But then he hesitated. No, he didn't know her. Or maybe he just couldn't remember. Lately his mind was a fog. Grief had made everything blurry. He looked away and turned back to the menu. "One espresso from the Beyond and a funeral bagel, please," he said to the barista. He found a small table near the window and sat down, quietly watching the street traffic pass by. Life was full of ironies. He never imagined that a cafe next to a cemetery would become part of his daily routine, but now it was one of the only places where he felt truly comfortable. Days passed, then weeks. Michael kept up his visits to the cemetery. He always stopped at Sarah's grave, always looked at the notebook, but he never opened it. He was waiting for a reply, waiting for her, but Samantha never wrote back. Maybe she had moved on, maybe she had let go, which deep down would be the most natural thing to do. Still, Michael couldn't accept it. Something in him insisted that the story wasn't over. At 7 Feet Under Café, Michael already had his go-to favorites. He always ordered a double mausoleum espresso, a cream cheese bagel a la Adams, and a ghost-face blueberry muffin. What he didn't know was that Samantha had noticed him long before. She knew exactly who he was. She had seen him at the cemetery, and now she saw him here. But she wasn't ready to approach. Not yet. She preferred to keep her distance. Samantha was an architect. She owned her own firm nearby and worked with everyone, from small businesses to major corporations. Professionally, she was thriving, but personally, she saw herself as a mess. The loss of Matthew had broken something inside her, something no one else could see. On the outside, she was flawless, efficient, in control. But inside, she felt lost. Dumitin Samantha was a longtime friend of Mary and April, the two sisters who owned 7 Feet Under Café. What Michael didn't know was that Samantha had designed the entire place. The layout, the concept, the eerie yet cozy atmosphere, it all came from her mind. Her dark sense of humor lived in every corner of the cafe. While the sisters gave fun, creepy names to the items on the menu, it was Samantha who had brought the vision to life. She should be proud, and in some ways she was. But at the same time it hurt. The cafe had become a massive success, while her personal life felt like it was crumbling. Fate was moving slowly, quietly preparing the moment. For now, Michael and Samantha continued their routines, unaware of the invisible connection forming between them, a bond that sooner or later would change everything. 3 months passed. Michael's life became mechanical. Every morning, he stopped by 7 Feet Under Café. Then he went to work, came home, worked some more, tried to sleep and failed every time. That was his life now. He had quit drinking, but instead of healing, he buried himself in work. Work was a distraction, an excuse. His friends begged him to go out, to reconnect. He said no every time. The truth, being around his friends meant remembering Sarah, and he didn't want to remember. The pain was a black hole. Every attempt to move forward pulled him deeper into it. He told himself this was better, safer, but fate had other plans. It was a Saturday afternoon. Michael had spent hours trapped in his own routine. Again, he needed air, a break. His plan was simple: go for a run, visit Sarah, stop by the cafe. He laced up his shoes, popped in his earbuds, and set out through the familiar streets, trying to clear his head. But his mind never really cleared. It always circled back to the same place. Always to Sarah. When he reached the cemetery, still catching his breath, his heart skipped a beat. Something was different. The notebook was back, and next to it, a single white lily. Michael looked around. No one. The cemetery was empty. A chill ran down his spine. He walked slowly to Sarah's grave and sat on the bench nearby. With trembling hands, he picked up the notebook and opened it. Inside, a short message. Michael, thank you for your words. I'm glad this notebook helped ease your pain. I hope you're doing okay. Until next time. P.S. Try the Hitchcock cheesecake. You'll love it. Michael read the message over and over again. Michael stared at the words, trying to decipher each one. Whoever had written that message knew who he was. They knew about the notebook, they knew about the pain, but what truly caught him off guard was the mention of the cheesecake. Was it an invitation? A tease? A sign? He wasn't sure. But he did know one thing. For the first time in months, something inside him stirred, a feeling he could barely recognize anymore. Curiosity. Without realizing it, Michael found himself with a reason to return to 7 Feet Under Café that day, but this time he had a new mission. He placed the notebook back by Matthew's grave, feeling a strange lightness in his chest, an unfamiliar rising sense of anticipation. As he walked toward the cafe, only one question echoed in his mind. Who was on the other side of that message? And why did that suddenly feel so important? By now, Michael had become a familiar face at 7 Feet Under. The baristas knew his name, his order was almost automatic. But that afternoon, something felt different. The air carried a subtle tension. The cafe was quieter than usual, like the place itself was holding its breath. When he walked in, Andrew, the same friendly barista, greeted him like an old friend. "Afternoon, Michael, the usual." Michael hesitated. Then, for the first time, he changed his order. "Today, I'll have the Hitchcock cheesecake." Andrew raised his eyebrows, pleasantly surprised. "Excellent choice. And to drink? Feeling adventurous today?" Michael felt a small flutter in his stomach. It was just a dessert, just a drink. But somehow, it felt like more than that. "What would you recommend?" Andrew thought for a second. "Well, frappuccino it or a milkshake omen, your call." Michael tensed slightly at the mention of it. Something about that name. "I'll go with the frappuccino," he said softly. "Perfect. Take a seat. I'll bring it to you." Michael chose a table by the window. He tried to distract himself, tried to calm the thoughts spinning in his head. Then, he overheard a voice from behind the counter. A sentence so simple, but it hit him like a thunderclap. "That's Samantha's favorite order." Samantha. The name bounced around inside his mind. The notebook, the cheesecake, the message. Michael didn't believe in coincidences. His stomach twisted. He tried to stay calm, but the thought consumed him. Could it be? The same Samantha? The woman who left that note? The one who also wrote to a ghost? Was this just the universe messing with him? Or was it fate, finally moving? Michael didn't know. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore the feeling any longer. Something was about to change, and he wasn't going to run from it. When Andrew finally brought his order, the cheesecake and frappuccino practically glowed under the cafe's warm lighting, as if they were characters in a scene that had been carefully, intentionally staged. "Enjoy, Michael," Andrew said with a knowing smile, placing the plates on the table. Michael nodded his thanks, but his mind was racing. He picked up the spoon, paused. What if she walked in right now? What if this was it? The air around him felt charged, electric. The anticipation made his heart pound. Acting on a sudden impulse, he waved Andrew back over. The barista looked slightly startled. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you," Michael said quickly. "No worries," Andrew replied with a grin. "Something wrong?" Michael hesitated. "Actually, yeah." He took a breath. "Sorry to be nosy, but I overheard you mention Samantha. Who is she?" Andrew relaxed. "Oh, sure," he said, smiling. "Samantha's a friend of my boss's. She actually designed this entire place. She's amazing, smart, creative, hilarious, and honestly, stunning." Michael furrowed his brow. "This whole creepy cute cafe idea, that was all her," Andrew continued. "April and her sister loved it. And look, now it's a hit." Michael tried to mask the frustration building inside him. This Samantha didn't sound anything like the woman from the notebook. She didn't sound like someone who left tear-soaked pages in cemeteries. She didn't sound like a woman swallowed by grief. "If she ever drops by, I'll introduce you," Andrew added cheerfully. Michael forced a smile. "Thanks," but he wasn't convinced. As Andrew walked away, Michael stared down at the cheesecake again. His thoughts tangled. Maybe he was just imagining things. Maybe it really was just a coincidence. Maybe he was chasing a ghost. Maybe he was holding on to something that didn't even exist. He let out a quiet laugh. "I'm acting like a lunatic." Taking a deep breath, he decided to focus on what was right in front of him. He picked up the spoon and finally tasted the Hitchcock cheesecake. The flavor exploded in his mouth. It was incredible. For a moment, he forgot everything. Forgot the doubt. Forgot the obsession. He just savored that moment. But deep in the back of his mind, the connection with Samantha lingered like a shadow. Monday, Michael followed his routine. He went to the cemetery as always, but this time something felt different. His heart was racing. It was a strange feeling, almost like a child's anticipation. And then he saw it. The notebook, once again resting on Sarah's grave. Michael held his breath. Without thinking, he rushed to it. His hands trembling, he opened the notebook quickly. He was expecting something big, a revelation. But there was only a single line written, "What did you think of the cheesecake?" Michael froze. He read the question over and over again, trying to understand what he was feeling. It was such a simple question, almost trivial, but it carried an unexpected weight. The anticipation that had built inside him deflated suddenly. In its place, a strange sadness. Michael looked around. No one. The cemetery was empty, wrapped in silence. How did she know he had gone to the cafe? Did Andrew mention it to someone, or was she watching? That thought sent a chill up his spine. Who was this woman? And why did this feel like a game he couldn't figure out? Then, in the middle of his confusion, guilt struck him like a blow. In his rush to uncover more about this strange connection, he had completely ignored the reason he was even there. Sarah. He turned toward his wife's grave, whispered, "I'm sorry, my love." His eyes fell on the fresh lily, and beside it, the red carnation. Michael took a deep breath. Then, pulling a pen from his pocket, he wrote his reply. "Hi, yes, I loved it. Thanks for the tip." He paused, hesitated. Words crowded his mind, but something stopped him from writing more. Fear of getting too involved, fear of what was happening. In the end, he chose to leave it at that, closed the notebook and placed it back on the grave. He stood in silence for a moment, torn between curiosity and a desire to move on. A gentle wind swept through the cemetery, carrying away some of his anguish, but leaving behind a quiet restlessness. Before leaving, Michael glanced one last time at Sarah's grave, and then at the red carnation beside it. The mystery behind the messages still haunted him, but now something more had taken root, a growing need to understand, to uncover the truth. Still unsettled by the message, Michael went straight to the cafe. He needed something familiar, something normal. He ordered his usual, the Mausoleum double espresso, the Adams-style cream cheese bagel, and the ghost-face blueberry muffin. His ritual, something to anchor him amid the chaos in his mind. As he walked out, distracted, he bumped into a woman entering. "Sorry," he murmured, without even looking up. But then, the perfume. Michael stopped. His eyes widened. That scent, delicate, familiar, unleashing a flood of memories. He turned quickly, searching for the woman, but she had already vanished. How? His heart pounded. It was the same perfume, the same scent he noticed that night when he left the cemetery. Michael looked around, trying to make sense of it, but nothing did. Was it coincidence? Or was he being pulled into something far greater? The question echoed in his mind, and for the first time, he felt afraid of the answer. Michael's sense of smell rarely failed him. And that perfume, that specific fragrance, what it was real, or was it just his imagination? He tried to rationalize, tried to dismiss it, but he couldn't. The familiarity of the perfume haunted him. It wasn't just any scent, it was one that gripped him. Something inside told him he couldn't let this go. The coincidences were piling up. Like puzzle pieces, he still couldn't quite fit together, but he felt he was getting close to something big, and he couldn't ignore the signs. The 7 Feet Under Café had become part of his routine. When he wasn't at the restaurant, he was either there or at the cemetery. One afternoon, focused on his laptop, Michael barely noticed a woman passing by. She moved discreetly and left something right beside him, a Michael Myers milkshake and a yellow post-it stuck to the cup. "Try this." The perfume. The same perfume. Michael's heart began to race. He turned quickly, but she was already walking out of the cafe. On impulse, he got up and rushed after her, but it was too late. She crossed the street and disappeared into the crowd. Michael stood on the sidewalk, trying to process what he was feeling. Excitement, frustration, but above all, certainty. She was real. He wasn't imagining things. And now, he had tangible proof. He held the milkshake. She was challenging him. And for the first time in years, Michael felt something he thought he had lost, the desire to play. Days passed, and the game continued. Michael tried every item on the menu, every clue, every subtle message, and little by little, something inside him began to shift. Work started to flow. The darkness that had consumed him for months began to fade. The mystery was feeding him. The anticipation brought life back into his days. But he still visited Sarah, still searched for the notebook, still waited. One summer afternoon, Michael sat at the cafe, laptop in front of him, headphones blocking out the world. And then she appeared. A woman in workout clothes and a cafe apron. She stopped in front of him. Michael took off his headphones, looked up, her light eyes, hair tied back. For a moment, his mind played tricks on him, but he didn't recognize her right away. Samantha was standing right in front of him, but she wasn't wearing perfume. She had just come from the gym, hadn't had time to shower, and without that scent, Michael didn't realize it was her. With a smile, she placed a Kruger espresso and a baby Chucky cinnamon roll on the table. Michael frowned. "Yes," Samantha kept smiling. "These are our 2 new items. Would you like to try them?" Michael hesitated. "Thanks, but I'm okay." He went back to his laptop, but Samantha insisted. "Why not? They're delicious. And on the house, we'd love your opinion." Michael looked up, a bit suspicious. Before he could say no again, Samantha leaned in slightly. Her tone turned playful. "Please, sir, my manager is watching." Michael was caught off guard by her casual tone, but he picked up the coffee, took a bite of the cinnamon roll. The flavor exploded in his mouth. Sweet, warm, perfect. "What do you think?" she asked, watching him closely. Michael nodded. "Very good. Like everything here." Samantha smiled. Then she took off the apron, sat across from him, her eyes on his. Michael was stunned by the boldness of the employee sitting at his table, as if there was already a closeness between them he didn't quite understand yet. "Told you they were good, didn't I?" She tilted her head slightly. "Have I ever recommended something bad to you?" Michael froze. His heart stopped. Her words echoed like thunder. It was her. The woman from the notebook, the voice behind the mysterious messages. Reality crashed down on him like a wave. The pieces finally fit together. But he couldn't believe it. "Samantha," he murmured, in disbelief. Samantha just smiled, a smile that said everything without needing words. She was real, and all those weeks of mystery, of near encounters and subtle clues, had led to this moment. The game of cat and mouse was over. Now, face to face, there were no more riddles, only the truth. Samantha smiled, a mysterious smile full of meaning. "Yes, it's me." She extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Michael." Michael hesitated for a second before shaking it, still trying to process everything. "But how?" His voice came out weaker than he expected. Samantha kept smiling, her eyes shining with a mix of amusement and understanding. "I could ask you the same thing." She leaned slightly forward. "How did you manage to walk into my life like that, without even realizing it?" Michael blinked, trying to piece things together. "I don't know." He shook his head. "It all started in such a mysterious way. I just wanted to understand." He let out a nervous laugh. "And now here you are, like it was all part of a plan I couldn't see." Samantha laughed softly. "Sometimes things happen exactly the way they're meant to, even if we don't understand it at the time." She observed him for a moment, reading his reactions. "But don't worry." Samantha picked up the Kruger espresso. It wasn't all that calculated. She played with the rim of the cup. "I was curious too, and well, it looks like our curiosity brought us here." Michael felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The mystery had dissolved. Now came the unknown of what would follow. He took a deep breath, a smile slowly forming on his lips. "So, what happens now?" Samantha stared at him for a moment, as if weighing the best answer. Then she raised her coffee in a playful toast. Now I think we enjoy this coffee." She winked. "And maybe I'll tell you how it all began." Michael smiled and raised his cup as well. The beginning of something new, something he never would have imagined. Time passed without them noticing. They talked, laughed, and tried new drinks from the cafe. Each moment seemed to deepen the connection forming between them. It felt as though destiny had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. When they finally noticed, the city was already wrapped in the soft glow of early evening. Samantha pulled Michael into a warm embrace, a hug full of meaning. He felt her warmth, the softness of the moment. Then her voice came like a whisper. "Thank you for bringing me back to life." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Let's plan more meetups, okay? I want to know everything about you." Before Michael could reply, she leaned in and left a gentle kiss on his cheek. That perfume, the same one that had haunted him. Now, it was no longer a mystery. It was real, a presence he'd recognize anywhere. He stood frozen. The moment passed like a scene in slow motion. He watched Samantha cross the street, just like that first time. But this time there was no doubt. On the other side, she looked back. Her eyes found his. And then she smiled. A smile that said everything. Michael simply waved back. A wave of emotion rushed through him. Joy, anticipation. A single tear rolled down his cheek and met the smile he couldn't hold back. Right there in that simple yet deeply meaningful moment. A new story was beginning. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever lived something like this? A moment when fate drew a path you never expected. Leave your thoughts in the comments, share your own stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that remind us that sometimes life leads us exactly where we need to be.